A very warm welcome to our lecture today. It's the position 4 lecture. So it's a fourth of 7 lectures in our series Healing Architecture. Today I like to introduce or like to welcome Peter Defesch. He is already here. And he has a lecture to the interesting topic spatial quality. So it's all about today spatial quality in healthcare architecture. And I like to hand over the word to my colleague from the Bauhaus University Weimar, who is doing actually a seminar with her students to this topic. Alexandra Abel, architectural psychologist, you have the word.
Also a warm welcome from me. Thank you for joining us today. Children who are treated in hospital have very special needs and need very special support. Emma's Children's Hospital tries to give them this support by design and architecture. Coming to a hospital, finding a home temporarily. That could stand as a declaration of intent over this design. They should find a home, even if only for a short time, where nobody would expect a home for themselves and their parents. Another intent of this design is supporting them in their most important activity, playing. Because playing is more than an occupation, a distraction. Playing is an attitude, is joy, happiness, health. In Emma's hospital, this is catered for inside the patient rooms by means of high quality technological equipment, but also by special invitations to interact with other children outside the private space. We look forward to the presentation of this special hospital. Today's guest expert during our preparation was Magdalena, a very special expert for us. She is 14 years old, had cancer herself, and was therefore repeatedly in the hospital. Thank you, Magdalena, for your answers, reflections, thoughts. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And now I hand over to Sophie, student from the Bauhaus University Weimar, for the introduction of Peter Defesch.
Hey everybody, today's topic is spatial quality, and I'm excited to introduce you to Peter Defesch from Defesch Farbe, Architecture and Urbanism, which was founded in 2016 after fusion. Our guest is one of the founders of the firm and working as an architect educated in the field of architecture, but also in urban, interior, and furniture design. He will tell us further details about the modernization and enlargement of the hospital. I'm proud to pass the virtual stage to you, Peter Defesch.
Thank you very much for your introductions, all 3 of them. I will try to answer your questions, and I will try to limit the lecture to the 30 minutes being given. 30 minutes seems like a long time, but I know myself, they're gone before I know. I will talk about the Emma Children's Hospital while I'm sharing a screen with the lecture itself. I hope you can all see this. If that's the case, then technically spoken, it works. I hope so. Okay. What I would like to talk about is, it is about space, and it is also about the ambitions of the Children's Hospital itself. This is, of course, one of the people who were in the hospital. She could also be a young architect. In the meantime, the funny thing is that it all happens in this existing building, and the existing building, you could see it right away. This is an aerial photograph. This is a giant hospital the way they were made in Europe, all over Europe in the 1970s. This is a building from the 1970s. I think in the time it was built, it was one of the biggest buildings in Europe. And it's so big that you can hardly picture it being a successful children's hospital. Well, it's not only that, it's an academical hospital with a children's department in it. And so,
Peter,
yes.
We can't see the slides actually. Maybe you try again to show us the presentation, share the presentation.
Thank you for telling me. Then I'll try again to share it. Yeah.
Perfect. Now it's
okay. I'm sorry about the beginning, but if this works well, then we're good. So the beginning for us, the assignment was on a site in a building that was already there. So the Emma Children's Hospital is for us an interior architectural assignment, which means, but it's a big one, which means that we have to understand the building we're working in, and we have to deal with it, whether we like it or not. And some parts of it we certainly liked, but many of them were really not your typical new children's hospital. So if we look at, the aerial photograph, what we needed to make was on the top 2 floors of the nursery wards, we were going to make the domain of the children's hospital. They could use, of course, all the operating rooms and all the facilities of the larger hospital, but their domain, the place where they were supposed to feel at home, was in the very top on the attic of this giant building. And we needed really to do some serious translation to fix that, to make them actually feel at home, which goes for the kids, which goes for their parents, which goes for the nursing staff and the doctors. They're all equally important users of the building. This is what we found when we went in there, and don't read the plans, but what it meant, the outside here, you see this is really 1975, all through Europe and also in Amsterdam. And after we took out everything that was obsolete for the new users, we came up with this wonderfully open structure that was a promise to whatever was there in the future. But the building from the outside was like that and still is like that. So the surprise is really on the inside. We started off trying to understand what the children's hospital wanted by analyzing what we had. And we said, let's draw a simple mental map of what we have here. And what we have is really from the inside as an interior quality, something that needs improvement. And what we need as an improvement is that we, in the new situation, could do away with this labyrinth type of dark corridor, because it seems to be that all hospitals, I don't know why it's necessary, but it happens so often. It's not necessary, but that we could do away with corridors who are dark and disorient people who go there as a visitor or people who work there. There's no beginning and no end. And on either side of this dark corridor, there's only boxes. There's only small rooms and they all look alike. And you never see what's inside when you walk through the corridor. So we said, this is a little sketch of everything that needs improvement. And on the right side is what a child would draw if a child would say, okay, this is my home, not my hospital, but my home. So the big difference here, that was basically our assignment. And I don't think I need to translate this, but we were challenged by the people from the hospital, say, think this one over, try to really get away with this, do away with this, and go get closer to what is a house, a home, and not just a hospital being a medical factory where you get better. So I tried to explain this to doctor, and they said something anatomical is not really right about this, but you can tell why we use this, we like to use this as a mindset for something else. So one of the first things was that they asked us make domains. And this particular children's hospital said, we would like to make domains for each age group. So it's children, it's teenagers, it's babies, and they deserve an environment that is different from each other, because sick teenagers and sick babies don't mix really well. They, at the best, they are next to each other, but they don't share a world, and they're just in the same hospital. So why don't you try to make a domain for every age group, and try to make as few as exceptions, if only necessary for medical reasons, as you can. So make teenagers live together there and have babies live together there, and their mothers and their parents, of course. So we can actually consider these departments not longer as departments defined by medical condition, but defined by age and what kids want. So we started off there. That was one thing. And the same question was about parents. They said, make us a children's hospital in which parents are important and not just allowed in there, but they can stay overnight if they want to. They can have a room of their own. They can work there. They can stay there for a few days. They don't have to leave the building. So make the parents an important second group of users. And they said also try to divide, make a separate domain for the people who work there. So don't mix medical treatment and medical staff activity with a children's world. Try to keep that apart. So what we did, we divided it, and we said, okay, that means we know what domains we're going to look for. And the next thing was, this one is about space, this diagram, and you can read it from the top left. It says this is a normal room. And then it goes into a series of sketches all the way to the bottom right, trying to open up. This is the box that you saw in the diagram before, which is what a hospital normally is consisting of all the time. And we said, let's not make the box. Let's open up the box and see if you do it differently. If you look at the real need, maybe just a place is enough. Maybe just a place with a curtain is what you need. Maybe a room that you can open up, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, let's make a collection of things that make the necessity of a closed box relative. Let's open it up. And if we do well, we can combine all these ideas, which are not so revolutionary, but they're revolutionary within the scope of a children's hospital. We combine this and make this into a world that opens up. So then I'll go a little faster because this is the in-between phase, but I thought it was fun to show you a couple of phases of the design process, just to get acquainted with how we approach it and how we think it, more like as much like music and a spatial game. And of course, yes, we need to make a hospital, so it needs to meet all the medical requirements. But in the meantime, let's find some solutions that we don't already have. So here we tried a lot of scenarios to make people aware of the possibilities that we had inside this given building, inside this given elevation and the columns and the cores. It was all there, but still there were so many things you could do with it and so many ways to open up a building that was closed. And we chose a scenario actually by testing it. These are speculations. These were actually sketches we made before we started the design process. And we tried to make people enthusiastic about all these possibilities. We said, whatever you choose as a scenario, but this is about daylight. This is about social spaces. This is about better orientation. This is about making domains. And it is not easy to make daylight because there's always a reason to put a room in a place that you want to give daylight or you want to give a view to the outside world. There's always a reason to make a hospital more economical, to fill it up and to fill up the plans to the maximum with boxes. But we said, okay, let's think differently and let's do away with as many boxes as we can and replace it by rooms and replace it by lounges and lobbies and meeting places, because they're not useless, they're extra useful. So we try to raise some enthusiasm for a different approach. And if we have a hallway, let's make sure that at the end of the hallway, there's always a view, and let's see the skyline of Amsterdam. And if you want to go into a room, let's make a door that has a window, because you can see whether you're welcome or not. And if you do something in the hallway, let's make a workplace for somebody who's there for a few minutes, or reads the newspaper when he doesn't want to wake up the kid. So we try to look at everything that is usual, everything that is a cliche, you might say, and try to look at it just a little bit differently and combine that and add that. So also the considered not so useful spaces, the in-between spaces, become valuable spaces and part of the experience and part of the social experience. So those speculative sketches, we combined them into an actual concept and said, okay, you know what? We'll make a main street that is also a shopping street, a social place to meet, a place to play, and a place for people to get information, to take a break from everything that goes around it. Around it, there's your private domain. This is yours if you are a parent, or if you are a child, or if you are a visitor, that is your private domain. Then you have the domain of your age group. And then you have the structure in which all these domains combine into this fine type of elongated social space. And the good thing about that space is that it has daylight everywhere. It has variation. It has an interesting program. It has places to go to school to. It has places to go see a movie. And it has places to play. So that is basically the concept is that it is being carried, the spine, like in a human body, is the most essential one to make all the connections. The spine is really something that houses social life in the hospital there. The other part of the story, I'm looking if I'm on time, but I think I'm doing okay so far. The other part of the story is that we said, okay, if it's a private domain, and that's very important for, of course, from the medical point of view, but also from the social point of view. A private room, this is a little sketch from a two-person's room, but let's see, and what can we do to make it new? Let's make sure that if you're in the room, you can always see who's coming. Let's make sure that if you're in your bed and you have to be in your bed for long hours at straight shoot, and you're recovering, that you don't get bored. So let's make sure that in between all these buttons that the nurses and the doctors have, you have a button for yourself. So let's see if we can make something of a bed that's more fun than the regular bed. Let's make sure that we have room to play, a room to do something else than your boring daily practice as a patient. Let's see if we can have people rooming in. Let's see if we can make a little workspace in that room so you can do something else. Let's see if you can do something to be able to welcome your friend into that room. So we were asked to think about all those things, but we also wanted to see if we can make a sort of next level private room. Of course, what is obvious is that every room nowadays has a private bathroom. So you don't have to go into the hallway. You don't have to go look for something that you use with all the other people together. It's all part of your private domain. So that is already becoming fast a standard. That was a given here, but all the other things were small little inventions we tried to make in this hospital. The same goes for the public domain. Let's try to not make it into a boring hallway, but a place where we can actually do things, where you can sit outside the realm of a private room and read the newspaper, not wake up the children, or sit there and have a conversation with the nurse outside of the ears of the kids, or be there and have your parents, whatever. So there's many, many possibilities in rooms that are in hospitals so often are being overlooked. Essential for us was transparency, view to the outside, daylight from above if possible, because we're on the top floor, and especially spatial connection. Everything that's blue in this little sketch here is transparent material. So we wanted to have as much idea, if you walk through the hall, of all the other rooms you're passing. So we celebrated this, the spine and the social rooms, all with these happy little sketches, in order to consistently, because we worked on this project for some 10 years, so we needed to keep people enthusiastic and to make sure that they will say, okay, sponsors, this is also your world, okay? Office management, this is also why you finance this hospital, etc., etc. Apart from the users, the parents, the nurses, and the doctors, there's, of course, all the people who need to make this possible. They needed this, and they needed us to convince them all the time. And so these steps in between are all necessary to keep the process going. So, and then we started building big models, and we had a couple of kids to join us and to do it. And we said, okay, we need domains for groups, but we also need personal identities. We said, okay, every bathroom could be different on the outside. So you know where you live, you know, you could have all that and find your own particular room. From building in models, we started actually building a mock-up, because everything in a hospital needs to be tested. And this was also a test. For instance, this was a little baby bath tub, and with a heating element on top of it. And the baby bathtub needs to, this is one of the technical tricks, of course, but we had fun trying to figure it out, make it work. This is a bath that can be raised, because if you have tall nurses, they need it higher so they don't break their back over their work. And if you have smaller people who bathe the baby, then they need to have a lower level. So whatever we could do to make this move and still being a good functional medical equipment, which we needed the mock-up for all that. So we needed the mock-up for electrical doors and transparency. Everything, every single thing of the design was tested, disapproved again, and then approved. So it does take a long time to fix this, but those are the highlights of the process, trying to convince people, trying to invent new things within the realm of normal solutions. And then this is the result. I have a number of pictures, I think. Yes, I have 5 or 6 minutes to show you around. And you can see for yourself, I think, whether you think it is a successful effort to make this light, to give daylight, to give identity, to give spatial pleasure, but also to open it up. So here we go. It's actually walls that give light. You can see if somebody's there, so you're never scared because you see there's people there. This is the entrance to your private room. You have curtains if you don't want to see anybody. You have the possibility to open the door if you do want to see people, if you want to hear them, if you want to see what's going on the hallway, so you're not isolated. But you have a number of choices here. That is basically what we try to make, a number of choices. We had, when it comes to identity, a playful group of illustrators, and we gave them assignments so that they could write on the wall, they could write on the glass, they could also say, okay, this is for a group, this is basically the staff area, so this is for the grown-ups. But we said, okay, it's very, very transparent, there's daylight everywhere, but we could also use this as a canvas for the artists to identify these places and make sure that they're not the same as any other office space in the hospital. So we put in extra effort to define and to make identity in a joyful way. These are open spaces that you cross and meet other people, other professionals. This is not, the area for kids, but this is away from their environment. This is again where they do live. This is where illustrators made the blind walls of the hallway always into a picture. So there's no boring place in this hospital. And we go on, I'll speed up a little bit. But you see, we took great effort to make daylight, transparency, differentiation in architecture, and we made it as playful as we could. Even we designed the curtains with a pattern of little logos. I'll get back to that there. And there's a theme to every age group as well, which we hope that responds to what that particular age is interested in. And we designed carefully the meeting places. This is where you enter a particular department or a particular ward. And you can see in a minute that this is not just the reception desk, but it's also the workplace of people who work here. It has an open wall to a place where you could sit and work quietly, but there's always visual connections, and there's always connections to the outdoor. Nobody's put away in a dark corner of the hospital. It takes great effort, but it does work basically everywhere. See here, it is in use. And you see that people, this is a workspace, this is a reception place, this is where little kids can climb on to see what's going on, because they're always curious, especially when it's about themselves, but they always see they want to be part of it. And it keeps on going like that. And you see all these different colors, all these different characters. This is by a French illustrator. So we try to engage people from all over Europe to make a contribution. And there were also places where we need to be more careful. This is intensive care. You cannot be as playful as you can be in other places. So here, this is the only place where white is the predominant color. And we were very careful with the illustrations. They are there, but they're very subdued and very carefully put on there. So this is where, for the sake of the patients, and their world needs to be without too much fuss around it, because there's really serious stuff going on. So you have to make an environment that is soothing to them. Also, normally IC wards are dominated by instruments. Here we try to conceal that a little bit and say, okay, we need, of course, maximum control and maximum visual connection between these places and the rest, and the people and the patients, but let's not have this look like a factory where everything else is good for kids. So the last few slides, identity by illustration. We had great fun doing this. You can well imagine that in a hospital where they have a large collection of art, they were going to put up the art on the wall like they do everywhere else in the hospital, in the big building. And we said, it's a beautiful collection of art, but let's make something specially for kids. So we had all these illustrators who were working in the realm of children's books or something like that, and invited them to do something for the children's hospital. One in particular, I think it's worth mentioning, is the logos. Because in a hospital like this one, not everybody is old enough to read, not everybody is Dutch enough to read Dutch, and not everybody is capable of reading complicated medical terms. So what we did was we minimized everything that is in text, and we maximized everything that is image. So once you get used to it, you see all these logos everywhere, and you find your ways, like pathfinding, like a little game. But what you do is make it easier for everybody to go around. We have that on the doors as well. So we designed with the graphic designer a set of logos that we could clarify what's going on in the building, in the room, without having to put a complicated text on it. It speaks for itself, of course. And then it goes on, I think I'm done, I'm through the time. It goes on with identity, the design of furniture. This is actually also a light sculpture. You can change it from green to red and to white, whatever your mood is. And we have that, see, these are the little tucked away open spaces at the end of a hallway where you have all these informal things you could do, and they are quite simple, but quite essential to the well-being of everything and everybody in the hospital. Many, many different social rooms. I selected them, but also daylight in all the rooms. Here you see the panel with this one button that the patient can use. All different colors for different age groups. We have a little play table that you can open up so you can do something in front of your little house and people pass by. You can invite them for a game. Little things that do matter. The big things that matter. The kids at play, their friends. This is a healthy kid, but he likes to go there. This is the daycare for people who they come back every day and they have a comfortable chair and a good environment to be there. This is what we call the Snoozle Camera. This is, it looks like looks like a discotheque almost. And the thing is that you can touch all the buttons when you're here. You can make it into your own domain. The restaurant with a terrace and a curtain you can play around with. This is where you can cook yourself. If you can actually go into the kitchen that teenagers can use. You can also order something from the kitchen, and the menu is not hospital-like, but it's basically almost restaurant level. This is one of the lobbies and the lounges where we also made these little coves where you can withdraw from hospital life and do whatever you think you want to do outside of the realm of hospital life. Find your own little place and sit there for a while, hide if you want to. See? This is the last picture. So I think it sums it up. We needed daylight, we needed a view, we needed a domain, and we needed something else than the cliche. I think I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think I'm very impressed from this project. It's a very sensitive work of architecture. And if I look at this, I think maybe we are in the end of the period of standardization. At least if I look at your work, maybe we are in the period of individualization to create identity, as you told us, to allow people to identify actually with this place, with the different areas in this building. Do you think it's a prototype for a new era of architecture, or do you think it's something like an accident? It's a unique possibility to do something, or maybe it could be a way for creating architecture in the future.
Well, we started out this endeavor, and it felt like an experiment because we were invited, and we were so lucky with these clients. We were invited to move away from the usual. And like it goes with experiments, you have to see whether it's successful or not. And it's in operation now for a number of years. And I go there quite often to see how everything is going, just to not to check, but to see whether it works the way we anticipated it and whether changes need to be made, because the medical world is constantly changing and generation of children are constantly changing. So we wanted to see whether this was a one-time achievement and only an example for that particular era, or that it would could be an example or partly an example for a next generation of hospitals, not a next generation of kids, but a next generation of buildings. And I see that I did not check, of course, whether this is an example elsewhere, but we do get a lot of visitors from all over the world that we show around, that we happily show around. And we definitely ask the doctors here, the nurses here, the children here, their parents, how is the building doing? And I think it's not so much a manifestation of individualization, like as a social affair, but it's a manifestation of a changing approach of, in this case, of doctors and nurses and the medical staffs themselves. And that to me, hopefully, is a lasting influence.
May I add a short question? If you visit the hospital now, is there any space or any design you are surprised by the users that works well, doesn't work well, that you perhaps next time would like to do in a different way?
Yes, there's one practical thing that keeps worrying me. In one of the lounges, we made a giant table football machine for not 2 kids, not 4 kids, but 11 on one side, 11 on the other side. This thing doesn't work. It looks great, but it worked for 2 weeks, and then I think it was over enthusiastically used, and we didn't make it strong enough. Because kids would come from the neighborhood, because this was the only machine in the neighborhood of Amsterdam that had this. So it was a big deal that it was there, and it's a public building, so kids could come in there. But I think we should have known this, and we should have done something about making it stronger. So you know how football games are. Table football is exactly the same. People get overexcited and. So it's broken, and it's tough to keep repairing it. But that's so we run into practical things. We also sometimes run into changing regulations, which have to do with hygiene, which have to do, of course, with what happens in healthcare in itself. We, of course, needed to make a flexible hospital, which was because you never know what kind of pandemic we were running into. When we were designing this hospital, there was no pandemic around. We had the SARS, of course, a few years before, and now we're in the midst of it. Making something flexible means that it is difficult to keep working with age groups, because you have to be a little flexible, because if worse comes to worse and you need teenagers to be in a ward that is designed for babies, it also needs to work temporarily for teenagers. So we noticed that there's 2 ambitions there that don't point the same way. That was one of the big difficulties. And I think in using the hospital, we run into that problem more often, that there's too many babies, there's not enough babies, there's too many teenagers, and we need to be switching sometimes. And then you lose a little identity of your own place, but you gain flexibility, which is, of course, necessary, because there is your patient, and you need to accommodate them.
Peter, maybe you allow me just one comment. Maybe you could stop the screen sharing, then we can see actually your face and the face of the people who discussed with you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And Christoph, I think I hand over the moderation to Christoph. He wants to ask you the next question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Buether, and a big thank you to you, Mr. Defesch, for your interesting insights of this successful project. My name is Christoph Kassel, and I'm in 3rd semester of my master studies in civil and real estate management at Bauhaus University. And now I would like to ask you some questions that came up when we discussed your assignment in group. And my first question is, what is your background in using stylistic design elements like the white Eames chair on the in the lobby for parents where they can wait? I could find a chair from Vitra, the Eames chair, you know, I think you know it. And did you try to design a modern waiting space for parents, or are there other intentions why you use such design elements?
Yes, that's a very nice question, because it gives me the opportunity to say a little bit something about the design side of the hospital. And for us, the design, the way you approach it, it's like a handwriting. You know, it's your personal choice of material, your personal choice of color, your personal choice of form, and also your personal choice of furniture. Now, of course, there's all these rules and regulations that you can imagine are specifically in place in a hospital. Everything needs to be able to, you need to clean it quickly and well, and it needs to be hygienic and sterile if necessary, and et cetera, et cetera. But apart from that, we were given a lot of freedom to make design be there more prominent, which, if you put it the negative way, is they asked us, and we gladly did that, move away from a hospital atmosphere as far as you can. Make it into something that you would buy furniture you would buy for your house, buy furniture you would buy for your school, buy furniture you would buy for your office. So the Vitra Chair is it's a beautiful design, but it's a classic, and it's a classic that does not remind you of a hospital. It reminds you of your house or your workplace or whatever. And so with the choice of those elements, we try to say, okay, of course it's a hospital, but it's also, when you're there, it's your workspace. When you're there, it's your playground. When you're there, it is your bedroom, your personal bedroom. So a hospital, the interior of a hospital is full of cliches, and we did away with them as often as possible, and we replaced them by furniture you would have in your house. We had fun doing that.
Yes, thank you for this nice answer. I can understand this very nice because I'm also a big fan. I would like to go on with my second question because I couldn't see something in the YouTube chat or here. So this is kind of an overarching question to the co-working with Die Plöck. I hope I spelled it in the right way. Did you try to create a specific atmosphere by using these colors in the dining area with this green curtain? Because my first thought was that green is perhaps not the most usual color in a dining room, or I wouldn't expect this color.
Yes, the design of the restaurant curtain, that is one out of a series, and one out of a series meaning that we had to, and we wanted to, we welcomed them. We have a number of sponsors to the hospital, because without the sponsors, you cannot do all this, because it's really a more than average budget you need to fix this. And you need sponsors to add to the budget. But with the sponsors come the extra demands and the extra questions. And so they said, okay, we are sponsoring the hospital, but we are sponsoring special things, so that everybody who visits the hospital, for instance, the ones who visit the restaurant or who cook there, can actually see, whether you like this ambition or not, but actually see that this is where the sponsor was active. It's without putting the name on it, but you. So we made this in this main street a chain of special items, of which the curtain is one. And the designer of that particular, it's difficult for us because it's not only us, but it's a number of designers. They designed the special elements that were recognizable by the sponsors. And we said, okay, we make this into a designer's playground. And so the curtain came out green and yellow and orange and half transparent, and it opens up and you can play with it. And that's it. And usually I went along with those ideas because I thought, okay, with a little help from my friends, it's going to be only better. And there were a few times, nobody's listening, so I can tell you, but one or two times I really was not in agreement with what was going on. Somebody had this wonderful idea that they would hang plastic plants from the ceiling so it would look like a garden. And I said, well, if we need plastic plants to fix this, then let's come up with something else. So at some point I was a bit resistant, but in general, I welcomed ideas of others that would make the world only richer and only more surprising. And the curtain is an example of that.
Thank you very much. I would like to pass on to Florian.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question regarding the existing structure, the hospital that that was there and which you transformed. I can imagine there being quite a bunch of challenges and compromises maybe even arising from having an existing structure and then transforming that into what exists now. Can you tell us some of the most challenging ones?
Yes, I'd be happy to, because it's a wonderful question, and because yes, it is a battle. It is a battle to make a children's hospital in a basic form that is not designed as a children's hospital, that is designed as a general nursing ward and nothing else. So we have a generic but very specific form to start with. Thank God there were only columns in the middle, because otherwise we'd had a lot of things in our way, basically. Nevertheless, that's why I showed the picture somewhere in the beginning of all the scenarios. For us, that was also a test. We tested, let's see what this structure can do. Let's see where can we open it up and where can we, so we tried to play with it. Like you play with the rhythm of the music when you are a composer. You play with the rhythm of the columns and of the window frames when you are an architect, and playing around with programs and playing around with space, most of all. I can tell you of one battle that we lost. I don't know if you're interested, but this is one that sometimes that's going to be a tough one, but we were on the top floor, and above us was the roof of the complete building. So we said, this is a perfect chance to get extra daylight into the hospital's darkest corners by taking a giant drill, putting it on the roof and making holes into the concrete roof structure in between everything that's there on top, and then put a light cupola on it and have daylight in the centerpieces of the plan. We did that in the preliminary designs, in the definite designs, in the technical designs, and we kept on doing that. So the first 6 years we were okay with that, but we could never build. So in the end, they didn't let us do that. And they thought that the existing hospital would be shaking too much, or we would make too much noise, or it was too expensive. All these things, all these practical troubles that we were causing. And what we got instead was very, very expensive artificial light fixtures that really look like daylight. So sometimes you lose a big battle and you gain a small one.
Well, thank you very much. I would pass on to Sophie, if you like.
Yes, sure. So I would take a question from the chat. So the first one in the chat said, how does the interactive light installation, the wall that can change colors, work?
I will repeat the question because our connection is not too good. How does the light changing system work? Is that the question?
Maybe I repeat it shortly.
Yes, thank you, Christoph.
Okay. How does the interactive light installation, the wall that can change colors, work?
Okay, sorry. Okay. There's two, actually. There's one above every single bed, and you can operate it. The fun of it is that you can really have your Saturday night disco if you want to, if you're up for it. You can operate it from your bed. So every bed ceiling has a light fixture that can change colors. You can adapt it to your personal mood. You can turn it off if you're sick of it, but you can play with it, basically. So that is this button, that is your button. All the other buttons are for the doctors, but that's your button. And then in the specific rooms that I showed 4 pictures of, it is just a fixture that is the lighting fixture that you can set the atmosphere of that room when you enter the room. So, but basically, essentially for us was not the disco, but essentially for us was the fact that somebody lying in the bed has something that you can choose in terms of your own personal atmosphere.
I hope my connection works now. Perfect. So I have another question regarding the project. So in times of the pandemic crisis, those places, especially to connect with other patients, sort of are not usable anymore. So how did the corona pandemic architecture or the project at all? Have there been like changes that had to be done or alternatives to offer the patients other opportunities?
Well, how did the pandemic work out in the children's hospital? Well, as awful as it has basically everywhere. So it was almost not doable to for architecture to make it easier. So what happened there is that a lot of things became very difficult or impossible, and it is really the matter that a matter of managing social life in the children's hospital. So it was more and more difficult. Is what we do now. Instead of getting together and discussing this architecture, is what we do. There's a screen between us, and in the children's hospital, of course, you cannot replace real healthcare by screens, but you have to limit the amount of visitors. You have to limit. You have to tighten your rules and regulations when you enter a room, etc. So the same that applies to us in our daily life applies to a hospital, but only worse, because everybody there is in a very vulnerable state. So it didn't make, because we were all waiting for it to go away, but it didn't change the architecture, because the architecture couldn't change as rapidly as the pandemic does. But also it was not useful because it in our behavior. And I think they lowered the maximum amount of children that they could have in one room, because there's also 2 people rooms and 4 people rooms, especially for those who need a social life while they're in the hospital. And it's very, very sad if for a longer time of period, you cannot use them the way they are meant. So as far as that goes, I'm afraid there's only bad news. And there's very little that architecture can do about it, unfortunately, because they would.
I can imagine, Peter, because you organized, actually, as you told us, a social space, the social life, actually. It's a lot of open space between all the different areas of the hospitals, and a lot of space to walk and to use. And I think it's very, very difficult, actually, if you use this space in times of Corona. But I want to ask you the question again, which we had in our small discussion before we started actually the lecture, because you told us something. You told us something after my question, what has changed in the last 20 years in creating actually this kind of architecture. You said the mentality of people has changed. You can say it's before it was dominated by the doctor's view, and now it's dominated more or less by the patient needs. Maybe you could describe us a little bit how you feel actually this change.
Yes, gladly. I witnessed this, and as I said, as an extra side remark to that, maybe it is more so in children's hospitals or pediatrics than in the rest of healthcare. But nevertheless, what we witnessed, and we had a beautiful lecture on the history of children's healthcare, especially in Amsterdam, given by the doctors and professors themselves, which depicted the history of children's healthcare and what happened there and what we witnessed, because it was very much in the specifications that we got when we started out designing this children's hospital. They said, literally, I think the professor said, we should have this transformation from a hospital that is built for the doctors, for top medical care, and make it into something more than that. We don't want to do away with top medical care. On the contrary, we want state-of-the-art medical care in this children's hospital, but we want something more than that. We also want it to be a domain for the children themselves. They are our primary clients. They should come first, and then their parents, and then the nurses, and then the doctors. So he switched the order. My prime client switched the order, and he said, we need to break with the ancient culture of hierarchy, which is in a conservative world of medicine quite difficult, and we should replace it by something that puts the client first. Well, I think that he had to fight in his arena, the management of the hospital, and I think maybe also in the medical culture that he grew up in. But I think this hospital, this Emma Children's Hospital, is at least an example of how far you can take it and really change that into a world that is being understood by children and is being used by children the way they want to use their world, even though they're sick, but they're still children.
Yes. I think with this format, we like to give an impulse for the further discussion on healing architecture. And you almost already answered my question. But I repeat it. Mm-hmm. What kind of impulse would you like to give to the discourse on healing architecture? Perhaps in addition to the things you already said.
Okay. I can add to it. A while ago, we had a convention on healing architecture, and somebody asked me, "What is healing architecture?" And I said it starts with simply thinking about architecture. You always think about architecture. What is a good place? And what is a good place for healthcare is not so very different than a good place to live in, or to go to school to, or to do your sports, or to be outside in nature. And so healing architecture is incorporating these things that if we only design a medical machine, we forget about that. But then if we go home after work, we work in a hospital all day, many people have a headache because they don't have fresh air. They don't have a view of the outside. They have bad air. They have no daylight. Their spaces are cramped. These are problems that many, many European hospitals have, or American for that matter. So healing architecture is architecture. We just use the tools that we architects have and use all the time. And that's why I emphasized in my little lecture so much on daylight, on social connection, on openness, on transparency, on domains and identity, because I think it does matter architecture does not heal. That is a metaphor, of course, but architecture can create the conditions that are good for your health or not so good for your health. And that is not rocket science, really. It's very much the core of architecture. Space, daylight, connection, social life, all that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, now time's over. It's already running so fast. It's very, very interesting actually to follow your words, to follow your lecture, to follow your argumentation for more human architecture, for a different way of actually creating architecture. We could discuss it even a quite long time, but for the moment it should be done. Thank you very much, Peter Defesch. Thank you very much, all the others who assembled today to listening to this lecture, to moderate and help asking very good questions. But I don't want to leave you. I just have the task to invite you to next week's lecture. Same place, same time, position 5, Architecture That Cares. Morten Ras Gregersen from Nord Architects from Copenhagen will join us, and I hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your wonderful questions, for having me, and for putting me to the test once more. I really enjoyed being with you, although it was through a screen, but thank you so much again. And I will definitely try to be part of next week's meeting.